In the depths of the cosmos, where existence rests in infinite stillness, fate weaves its delicate threads, light as the pulse of stars. Torn souls, suspended between chains in the hope of freedom, stand on the edge of the abyss, bearing the contradictions of creation. Some fight in wars that leave eternal scars, dreaming of a sky free from the burdens of destiny, while others submit to authority, finding meaning in control. And some choose solitude, hiding in cold shadows, where silence soothes the soul and darkness conceals the pain. Wars, bleeding wounds in the fabric of reality, shattered mirrors reflecting the division of the self. Shadows are not just a refuge, but a gateway to truth, where forgotten dreams whisper and secrets fear the light. In abandoned corners where wisdom is carved into stone, only those whose eyes are illuminated can perceive it, and only those chosen by fate remain afterward. Do not seek what is not meant for you, for truth may be a dagger before it becomes light. In a secluded forest, far from the world like a wound in time, lived Makti, a young man leading a quiet life in a humble cabin made of old wood and scattered stones. He was surrounded by silent trees, as if they were guarding mysterious secrets. He spent his days gathering herbs from the valleys, fishing in a nearby river, and reading ancient books about legends and forgotten places. He wasn't a hero, but a man who preferred tranquility, seeking peace in the forest's silence. A faint scar on his arm, a long line from the past, was a memento of a confrontation he never spoke of, perhaps with a beast or an old mistake. He wasn't prepared for what the forest had in store. The forest was strange. By day, its trees seemed ordinary, but at night, they turned into jagged shadows as if hiding something. The river sometimes glowed with a faint shimmer as though a strange light emanated from its depth. On some nights, fish would float to the surface, dead, their glassy eyes staring into the void as if they had seen something terrifying. The birds sang peculiar melodies, sometimes as if recounting ancient tales, and at other times they fell silent abruptly as though something was watching them. Makti heard faint whispers among the trees on quiet nights, as if the forest spoke in a cryptic language. He kept an old book, its pages worn and frayed, that told of the forest's legends, spirits dwelling in the roots, hidden gateways to other worlds, and the Black Mirror, a portal that revealed the truth to those who gazed into it, but at a price. Makti dismissed them as mere stories, yet something inside him doubted. On a quiet night, Mahdi sat by a small fire in his cabin. The teapot emitted the scent of mint as he read an ancient book about forgotten legends. The fire danced, casting shadows on the walls where he had carved simple etchings, interlocking circles and strange shapes he had seen in his dreams. Suddenly, a violent knock on the door shattered the night stillness. He froze, his heart pounding. The forest didn't know visitors. He grabbed an old knife from the table cautiously and opened the door. Before him stood a girl, her face pale as ash, her eyes wide as if staring into an abyss. Her silk dress, torn and stained with mud, seemed to belong to another world. A silver necklace around her neck, adorned with a distorted star, gleamed under the moonlight as if it held a secret. She didn't speak, but threw herself at him, her fingers clinging to his cloak, her muffled scream piercing the silence, a mix of moans and murmurs, as if she were fighting something invisible. "Calm down," Mahdi said, his voice steady but cautious. He brought her into the cabin and sat her near the fire on a wooden chair. She trembled, her eyes darting around the room as if seeing ghosts. He brought a cup of tea, hoping to soothe her, but it barely touched her trembling hands before she erupted. She leapt from the chair, screaming cryptic words, and lunged toward the fire as if trying to throw herself into the flames. Makti moved quickly, grabbing her arms and pulling her away from the blaze. She resisted with a strange strength, scratching his arms until they bled, but he managed to hold her back. "Stop!" he shouted, trying to restrain her. Suddenly, she went limp, her eyes rolling back, and she collapsed unconscious, her body crumpling to the floor. Makti stood, breathing heavily, his hand shaking. He looked at the girl, her body now still, but her face still etched with terror, even in her unconsciousness. He feared she might wake and try again, or harm herself. He glanced at a wooden pillar in the center of the cabin, a support for the roof. He grabbed a hemp rope from a corner of the cabin and approached her. "This is for your safety," he whispered, gently tying her hands around the pillar. He ensured the rope wasn't too tight, but firm enough to keep her from moving. He stepped back, his heart pounding with unease. Makti's hand reached for a pendant around its neck, a smooth, dark blue stone he had acquired during one of his journeys with his companions, Einar and Hassan. It pulsed with a faint life when he touched it. He rarely used it, but he felt its weight grow heavier, as if it sensed danger. He closed his eyes, focusing his will into the stone, calling for Einar and Hassan. At that moment, the stones around Einar and Hassan's necks, identical to his, glowed with a warning pulse, as if a silent message passed between them. Makti felt a faint surge of energy, but he wasn't sure if the summoning would work. The stone cooled, as if waiting. Makti turned his attention back to the girl. She was tied to the pillar, her head slumped, her breathing shallow. He tried to approach her, but the sound of branches snapping outside the cabin made him stop. He grabbed his knife and stood by the slightly opened door, his eyes scanning the darkness. The forest was eerily silent, no birds, no insects. He felt something watching him, but he saw only shadows. He closed the door, placed a wooden barricade, and returned to her. He tried speaking to her, despite her unconscious state. "Who are you? What's chasing you?" But she didn't respond. Her silver necklace caught his attention. He stepped closer, examining the distorted star. Its engravings resembled symbols from his old book, related to mysterious rituals. A chill ran through him, as if the necklace pulsed. He stepped back, his heart racing. Everything about her was a mystery. Time passed slowly. Makti sat near the fire, watching the girl with scrutinizing eyes, trying to unravel her enigma. Her face was pale as wax, as if life had been gradually drained from it, yet her features were delicate and sharp, carrying a mysterious elegance that didn't belong in the wild forest. Her eyes, though closed now in her unconsciousness, had been wide when he first saw them, a deep honey color, bearing traces of indelible terror. Her eyebrows were thin and arched, as if carefully drawn, adding an expression of unease to her face, even in stillness. Her nose was small and straight, and her lips were thin, slightly chapped from the cold or dehydration, though their pale pink hue was still visible. Her long black hair was disheveled, strands falling over her shoulders, stained with mud and some dried leaves, but it was thick and once glossy, as if it belonged to someone accustomed to caring for themselves. Her cheeks were slightly sunken, perhaps from exhaustion or hunger, but her cheekbones were prominent, giving her face a distinct shape. There was a small cut above her left eyebrow, a thin line still red as if she had been recently injured. Her face, despite the etched terror, held a strange beauty, as if it belonged to another world, a world Mahdi didn't know. He felt a vague familiarity, as if his memory were trying to recall a distant dream. He tried to remember his recent dreams. There had been strange shadows, faceless figures, and a voice whispering a name that faded. In a vision, he saw a woman by a strange sea, its waters viscous and foul, wearing a necklace like hers. Was it her? Or was the forest playing with his mind? Suddenly, the girl stirred. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes gleaming with a strange light, as if something else were looking through them. She tried to pull at the ropes, but the restraints held. "It won't stop," she whispered, her voice faint but chilling. "It's coming." Makti stepped closer, his hand on the knife. "Who's coming?" But she fell silent again, her eyes glazing over. Another sound came from outside the cabin, heavy footsteps accompanied by a low hum. Mahdi gripped the stone, his hand trembling. "Einar, Hassan, where are you?" he whispered, channeling his will into the stone again. He felt a stronger pulse, as if the summoning was closer. The footsteps outside quickened. At dawn, the door shook violently, as if something were trying to break in. Mahdi stood, knife in hand, but a familiar voice called out, "Mahdi, open the door, you hermit!" It was Einar. Mahdi opened the door, and Einar stepped in, a handsome young man in his early 20s, with short, curly brown hair that fell over his forehead in a casual way that added to his charm. His green eyes sparkled with a mocking glint, and his features were sharp and harmonious, with a constant smile that lent him an alluring charisma. He wore light metal armor with 2 swords strapped to his waist, moving with a playful yet confident grace. A similar stone around his neck pulsed. Behind him entered Hassan, a dark-skinned young man of the same age as Einar, with a strong build that reflected his physical strength, his broad shoulders and toned arms suggesting a life of hard labor. His features were ordinary, neither striking nor remarkable, but his black eyes were piercing, carrying a steadfast confidence. He wore a simple cloak, carrying a dagger and a matching stone, moving with calm, measured steps. Einar cast a glance at the girl tied to the pillar and smirked mockingly. "What a night, Mahdi! Have you finally decided to host guests, or are you now abducting princesses?" he said, tilting his head toward the girl, his eyes gleaming with a playful spark. "Who's this, your secret lover? Or has the forest started sending you gifts?" Mahdi frowned, his hand still on the knife. "This isn't the time for your jokes, Einar. She came at night, terrified. She tried to jump into the fire, fainted. I tied her up for her safety, and I summoned you with the stone." Einar raised an eyebrow, toying with the hilt of his sword. "The fire, you say?" He chuckled lightly, but stepped closer to the girl, inspecting her. "She looks like she's running from a demon, or maybe an angry husband." He turned to Mahdi and winked. "But seriously, hermit, since when do you deal with magic and crazy girls? The stone nearly woke me from my sleep." Hassan, who had been silent, took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the girl. "Enough, Einar," he said in a calm but firm voice, carrying unshakable confidence. "The forest doesn't bring strangers without reason. The stone doesn't glow without cause." He sat on a chair, his hand on his dagger, and looked at Makti. "What exactly happened?" Makti explained quickly. "She was screaming, scratching herself, tried to throw herself into the fire. After she fainted, I tied her up. I heard footsteps outside. Something's moving. I summoned you twice." Einar scoffed, though he touched his stone. "Twice? I thought you were testing us." But he paused, looking at the girl. Did she say anything? Or does she just enjoy causing terror? "She said, 'It's coming,'" Makti replied, his voice low. "I don't know what she means, but something's after her." Hassan, who rarely spoke, lifted his eyes to Makti. "You saw her in your dreams, didn't you?" he asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Her face, or something like her." Makti nodded, surprised. "In nightmares, by a strange sea, with a necklace like this? But I don't understand." Einar laughed softly. "Nightmares, glowing stones, a girl who wants to burn. By the gods, Makti, your life's become more thrilling than tavern tales." But he stepped toward the girl, his hand on his sword, his smile fading. "Let's see if she'll tell her story." He drew his sword, gently placing its tip on her cheek, and whispered, "Time to wake up." The girl opened her eyes slowly, the terror evident in her wide, honey-colored gaze. She looked at Einar, who stood before her, his sword grazing her cheek, a mocking smile on his handsome face, his green eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and caution. She tried to move her body, only to feel the rough hemp rope pressing against her wrists, tightly wound around the wooden post. She didn't seem shocked. Her expression was dark, as if she had been expecting the worst from the start, as if fear had become a part of her very being. Einar took a step back, toying with the hilt of his sword, while Makti pulled a wooden chair and sat in front of her. "I had to tie you up with this rope," he said calmly. "I hope you understand my position." The girl spoke, her voice trembling. "How did I get here? Who are you?" Hassan, standing near the door, answered with a serious tone. "The same question applies to you." His face was stern, his broad shoulders prominent under his simple cloak, his dark eyes piercing. Makti began to explain. "You came to my cabin at night, terrified, trying to throw yourself into the fire. I had to stop you." But as he spoke, the girl's expression turned to wild terror, as if his words had awakened something dark within her. Suddenly, she leaped to her feet, her frail body moving with unnatural strength, pulling at the rope with all her might. The coarse rope scraped her skin, tearing the flesh around her wrists, blood flowing heavily, tracing red lines down her arms. She screamed in a shrill voice, not entirely human, a mix of pain, fear, and rage, as if something else was controlling her. "Let me go! He'll come back! He'll come back!" she repeated hysterically, her eyes wide open, blood mixing with sweat and dripping onto the wooden floor, forming a small, slowly expanding pool. Makti stepped back, his heart pounding, while Einar raised his sword cautiously. "What's happening to her?" he shouted, his tone devoid of mockery for the first time. Hassan approached quickly, but stopped when the girl began slamming her head against the wooden post with force, as if trying to shatter her skull to break free. Blood sprayed from her forehead, staining her pale face as she screamed, "I won't go back! I won't go back!" Her movements were frantic, unnatural, as if something possessed her body, driving her to destroy herself. The rope tore her skin further, exposing raw flesh beneath the blood, and small pieces of skin began to fall to the ground, leaving a gruesome trail. The metallic smell of blood filled the cabin, and the sound of her ragged breaths mixed with her screams made the place feel like the stage of a nightmare. Einar approached cautiously, sword raised. "Makti, do something! She'll die like this!" But Makti was frozen, his dark brown eyes fixed on the girl, who no longer seemed human, her eyes darting rapidly as if seeing something terrifying in every corner of the cabin. Suddenly, she began to laugh, a low, broken laugh mixed with screams as she pulled harder on the rope until one of her wrists began to deform grotesquely, bone visible beneath the torn skin, blood pouring like a small waterfall, staining the floor and reaching Mahdi's boots. Finally, Mahdi drew his knife quickly and cut the rope, but the girl lunged at him with strange strength, as if she felt no pain. Hassan caught her at the last moment, his arms wrapping around her frail body, and with a press on her neck, he rendered her unconscious. She collapsed in his arms, blood still seeping from her wounds, her face smeared with it, her breaths faint. Makti, still breathing heavily from the ordeal, knelt beside her quickly, his hand trembling as he opened his leather satchel. He pulled out a small clay jar containing a dark green ointment with a strong smell, a mix of herbs and ancient oils. "Help me, Hassan," he said in a low voice, dipping his fingers into the ointment. Hassan gently laid the girl on the ground, her torn wrists outstretched, blood still trickling slowly, her pale face streaked with red lines from her forehead to her chin. Mahdi began applying the ointment to her wrists first, his hand moving carefully, the ointment leaving a glossy layer on the torn skin. Then he moved to her face, wiping the blood with an old cloth before applying the ointment to the deep wounds on her forehead. Suddenly, miraculously, the bleeding stopped. The blood that had been flowing ceased as if something had sealed the wounds, and the ointment began to seep into the torn skin. The wounds, once open and gushing, started to heal slowly, the exposed flesh shrinking gradually as if the skin were weaving itself anew, though at an oddly slow pace. Mahdi looked up at Hassan and said quietly, "She'll be fine, it seems." Hassan nodded slowly, his dark eyes watching the girl, then asked seriously, "What do we do now?" "We need to move before she wakes up." Einar, standing at a distance, broke the silence with a tense tone. "My God, Mahdi, what did you bring here?" That laugh, her screams. It was like something was possessing her. I've never seen anything this terrifying. Mahdi shook his head, his eyes fixed on the girl. "We need to leave now. Whatever's after her might be close." Hassan nodded. "No time to hesitate. We move immediately." Einar commented, "If that thing's chasing us, I hope it's worth fighting." Mahdi hurried to the corner of the cabin, grabbing his leather satchel and packing his knife, old book, remaining herbs, and dried food. "Come on, we're wasting time." They left the cabin and mounted their horses under the morning sunlight. The forest they left behind was dense, its tall, tangled trees swaying with the light breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers. Mahdi led the way. Hassan held the girl on his black horse, and Einar followed on his horse, Star. After half an hour, they emerged from the dense forest into an open area. The ground was covered with short green grass, scattered with small gray stones, and in the distance stood a tall hill, its shadows stretching across the ground like long black arms. The sky above the hill was growing heavy with dark clouds, moving slowly as if watching something. Makti stopped suddenly, spotting two knights clad in white atop the hill, wearing black masks, observing them. He signaled to the others with caution. The knights descended from the hill to block their path, their steps leaving faint marks on the dew-soaked grass. Einar stayed by Hassan's side while Makti stepped forward. "I greet the knights. My companions and I are headed to the city of the fallen king, seeking only to pass in peace." One of the knights answered in a pale voice, as if whispering from afar, "Dismount from your horse, then speak." Makti replied, "It's better if you let us pass in peace. We don't want trouble." The knight tilted his head, his black mask hiding his features completely, though his eyes glinted faintly under the sunlight like dark gems. "Our master wants to know if you're worthy." Makti narrowed his eyes, his hand tightening on the hilt of his knife. "Worthy of what? And who is your master?" The knight answered coldly, "You seem curious. You'll find out later." Makti didn't back down, but tried to buy time to understand the knight's intentions. "Why are you blocking our path?" he asked, his voice sharp as he narrowed his dark brown eyes, his forehead slick with sweat under the sunlight. In his mind, he thought, "Are they here for her? Is their appearance tied to what happened in the cabin?" He didn't mention the girl aloud, but stole a quick glance at Hassan, who held her steadily, her black hair draping over his shoulder. The second knight, standing beside the first, answered in a hoarse voice, "We have orders. It's not who you are that matters, but what you carry." His white armor gleamed under the sun, adorned with fine vein-like lines on his black mask. He moved his hand slightly, but didn't point directly at anyone, making Makti wonder if he was hinting at something more than he let on. Einar, standing behind Makti, let out a light laugh, but gripped his swords tightly. "Orders? That's all you've got? Well, if you want something, why not say it clearly instead of this empty talk?" His green eyes watched the knights cautiously, his mocking smile hiding his tension. The first knight responded in a calm but cold tone. "Not everything is said. Some things are discovered through strength." He turned his head slightly, his black mask reflecting the sunlight, making his hidden eyes appear like dark hollows. The grassy ground beneath their feet was wet with dew, making soft sounds as they moved, while the dark clouds on the horizon thickened, carrying a cold breeze that stung their faces. Makti felt the tension rising, but kept his tone sharp. "If you want something, say it now. We're not here to waste time." In his mind, he tried to connect the events. The girl's behavior in the cabin, her screams, her unnatural strength. Do these knights know something about it? But he kept his thoughts hidden. His forehead creased as he watched the knight's movements. The second knight replied in a low voice, "What we want will become clear soon. But first, you must prove yourselves." He took a step forward, his armor clinking faintly, and raised his sword slightly, as if preparing for combat. Hassan, who had been watching silently, spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Einar, no need to provoke them. We don't need a fight if it can be avoided." He stood steady, the unconscious girl in his arms, her pale face covered with a thin layer of ointment. Einar shrugged, but didn't lower his swords. "I'm not provoking them, Hassan. I'm just trying to figure out what they want. Because I'm sure these guys aren't standing here just to chat." He glanced at the knights, Then at the horizon, where the dark clouds were slowly gathering, casting a heavy shadow over the green grass, Makti raised his hand to calm the situation. "Enough, Einar. And you?" He turned to the knights. "If you want something, say it clearly or let us pass." In his mind, he was still thinking, if they're after the girl, why don't they demand her outright? Is there something else behind this? The first knight tilted his head as if weighing Mahdi's words, then said, "It's not that simple. Proving your strength is the only way to pass." He pointed his sword at the ground before them, as if drawing a line they couldn't cross. Mahdi felt anger rising, but kept his composure. "If you're set on fighting, let's see who's left standing." The first knight drew his sword slowly, its blade gleaming under the sunlight, and said, "Very well, let it begin." Mahdi drew his sword quickly. Einar urged his horse, Star, forward, and drew both his swords. "If this is what you want, let's see who falls first." The first knight advanced toward him, sword raised, and attacked Einar directly. Einar dodged the strike, his right sword parrying the blade with a metallic clang. "Is that all you've got?" he said mockingly. "I expected more from someone wearing a mask." The knight didn't respond but attacked again, aiming a low strike at Einar's leg. Einar leaped off his horse and countered with a dual strike from his swords, but the knight dodged one and parried the other. "You're fast," Einar said, "but can you keep up with me?" Mahdi, parrying the second knight's blows, tried to wear down his opponent. If they're here for her, they won't get her easily, he thought, as he blocked a powerful strike, the blades clashing with a resounding clang. "What do you really want?" he asked, his voice carrying a challenge, trying to read the knight's movements. The second knight didn't answer, but tilted his head, his black mask gleaming under the sun, and continued his attack, his sword moving swiftly, forcing Mahdi to defend. The grassy ground beneath their feet was wet, making soft clicking sounds with each step, while a cold breeze blew from the horizon, carrying the scent of damp earth. Einar finally found an opening and drove his sword through the first knight's eye, the blade emerging from the back of his head. Blood poured out, and the knight fell from his horse, but his leg remained caught in the stirrup, causing the panicked horse to gallop off, dragging the body behind it. The second knight paused and tilted his head. "Well done." Suddenly, the first knight rose from the ground, blood streaming from his pierced eye, yet moving slowly toward Einar as if he hadn't died. Einar stepped back. "What is this? How is he still alive?" Mahdi shouted, "Einar, be careful!" as Hassan prepared to intervene, his eyes narrowing,